So with the recent release of the film Gawain and the Green Knight, I am sure lots of people out there will be thinking, Jacob, now what prog and folk music can we listen to get us into that Gawain and chill vibe? Okay, I'm sure literally no one is asking themselves that. And Gawain and chill is not a thing. It's not a vibe at all. But it's too late. I've already made this video. So a bit of context here first. Gawain and the Green Knight is based on an alliterative poem of the same name, a chivalric romance written around 1400 in the Midlands of England. Now, I personally choose to believe that this means that the poem would have been originally read in a Birmingham accent. Sorry to everyone from the West Midlands. Anyway, it's a genuinely good poem, and although reading Middle English is difficult and reading this specific version of provincial Middle English is harder still, there are a bunch of different translations you can choose from if you do want to read it, including one by a certain J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the entire story of the poem unless I spoil it for you. Is it possible to spoil a 600-year-old story? But you do need to know a little bit of it. So all we need to know for now is that the story starts in Camelot at New Year's Eve, and Arthur and his knights are basically being just a bunch of medieval frat boys, drinking, eating, and just all-round partying. Anyway, a huge green guy comes in, the titular Green Knight, of course, and challenges the bravest man to step forward and to play a game.
I want to play a game.
After a bit of back and forth, one Gawain, the youngest and the least experienced of the knights and Arthur's nephew, steps up to the plate. He is told that the game basically is to chop off the Green Knight's head and to take a blow in return a year from now. Weird game, right? Anyway, Gawain chops his head off, the Green Knight then picks up his decapitated noggin and he rides out. Gawain then goes looking for the knight a year later in order to receive the return blow. So this is one of those archetypal stories that has been referenced, parodied, or reinterpreted in loads of other media, all the way from Adventure Time.
And if I win, chop chop.
Deal.
Wait, Finn, I think he's plotting something.
It's fine, I'm 17, I've hit my stride.
To board games based on the story. So I've made you a bit of a playlist, which you can find linked in the description below, or if you're watching on YouTube, on screen now. This has loads of songs with a cool medieval fantasy vibe to get you into that Gawain and chill mood. So in this video, I'm just going to mention a few of my favorites and some honourable mentions. I'll be focusing on those tracks and artists that are less well known, as they're a bit more fun to talk about. Although classics like Led Zeppelin's Battle for Evermore are obviously awesome, we all already know that, so there's no point going over it again. So, onto the songs. My first choice actually has more in common with Piers Plowman, another medieval alliterative English poem, than it does with Gawain and the Green Knight. So, Piers Plowman was written by some bloke called William Langland around the same time as Gawain, and is about, well, it's about a lot of things, but it's all Christian stuff. It's an allegorical and alliterative poem detailing 8 visions that a chap called Will experiences in a sort of religious journey towards redemption or something? Honestly, even though I studied this at universities, I can hardly remember the details. If you want to know what happens, again, there are loads of translations to choose from, or just use the Wikipedia. So this first song is called The Ploughman's Dream, and was recorded by a very, very underrated 1970s band called Griffin. These guys really pick up and run with that medieval aesthetic, and the song is in fact a traditional song, first collected by Vaughan Williams at the beginning of the 20th century from a Surrey labourer, no less. Like Piers Plowman, this is a dream poem, quite obvious given the name, and is very much a Christian fable about, well, this time it's about not swearing at animals, I think? Anyway, if you could ever really doubt the credentials of a band called Griffin, take a look at the album cover for their second album, which the song is from, called Midnight Mushrooms. Those resplendent robes, absolutely beautiful. And they also play loads of oboes, crumb horns, and harpsichords. Pretty cool.
The sun's bright beams was all as dark as night. The thunder roared from underground, the earth seemed to gape, blue flames from.
This next song is less obviously fantastical and less medieval, but no less brilliant. This is by the progressive rock band Renaissance. Renaissance are easily one of the most unique bands of the 1970s prog rock scene, and they're hardly even rock at all. They're more orchestral folk, I guess. only occasionally applying electric guitar. The most rock thing usually they have in their songs is the electric bass guitar. Annie Haslam, the singer, has a ridiculous vocal range, and she doesn't really sing like a rock singer. She's much more classical. Combine all of that with long-form songs with long classical piano intros and obscure literary references in the lyrics, courtesy of absentee lyricist Betty Thatcher, who is based in Cornwall, away from the rest of the band, and you end up with a band that sounds out of place even in the wacky and weird and diverse scene of 70s prog. This song, The Vultures Fly High, is one of their rockingest. Not because of the presence of electric guitar or heavy drums, it's a brilliant piano and bass-led groove that sounds unlike anything else. Now, I know I've said that a lot about this band, but it's just true. The lyrics are often assumed to be about the attitudes that critics had towards the band, who were never really commercially successful at all, but as far as I can tell, it's just not true. The lyrics were actually originally written for the rock band Wishbone Ash, and the lyrics were then made a little less dark for Renaissance.
While in the streets of all are fierce, they reign supreme as orders go. They are the last to have their say, and last to know it doesn't matter how you try, it doesn't matter what you say. They always watch with hollow eyes to put you down. They always find a way to criticize. The vultures fly high.
With this next song, we veer back into the land of the obviously fantastical, but this time it's much more pagan or mythical rather than religious. Stan Rogers' Witch of the Westmorland. Now, this song was actually originally written by a Scottish folk singer called Archie Fisher, but Stan's version is the best, and so I'm sticking with it here. This isn't really proggy at all. There's the odd bar of 5/4, but it's all pretty straightforward folk, with a very solid stanza form and no chorus. The song tells the story of a wounded knight who is told by a talking raven, no less, that his wounds can only be cured by the Witch of the Westmorland, who dwells in the Winding Mere, Windermere, in the English Lake District. Long story short, he goes a-looking and eventually he finds her. She's a sort of centaur beast who briefly fights the knight and then turns into her human form and heals him. It's one of those stories that feels like a fable with a specific point or lesson to be learned, but doesn't actually seem to have one. At least not obviously to me. I guess the witch is a bit fey and therefore whimsical and difficult to fathom for us mere mortals, but either way, the song is amazing.
Rose she from the rain, and fast and fleet went she, one half the form of a maiden fair, with a jet black mare's body, and loud, long and shrill he blew, till his steed was by his side, high overhead the grey hawk.
My final choice is by one of the most brilliant progressive rock bands of the 70s, more famous now for their 80s synth stuff, Genesis. The song is Dancing with the Moonlit Night, one of the best album openers in prog or even rock full stop. Genesis are a very hard band to actually pin down. Even during their prog days, they kept hold of a pop sensibility that I think eluded their contemporaries, but they managed to combine that with some very nice harder rock stuff, acoustic folksiness, kind of whimsical Englishness and fantastical lyrics. There's a bit of debate whether Selling England by the Pound or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is their best album. I personally think that it's the former. I think Selling England by the Pound has a little bit more bang for its buck and is a bit more consistent throughout, but they're both great. I had to include this song here just because it's possibly the best medieval fantasy, Arthurian legends, swords and shields, Dungeons and Dragons style prog rock song there is. Given its references to contemporary companies though, like Wimpy, and its whimsical take on British culture and myths, it's actually a bit more than just high fantasy prog rock and sees the band tackle 1970s politics a little bit. Personally, I don't get too caught up in that stuff. I feel the lyrics aren't really coherent enough to be taken concretely one way or another, and they work through vague imagery and illusions more than specific meaning. The point is though that this song is super cool and you should definitely listen to it.
The captain leads his dance right on through the night. Join the dance, follow on till the grey of sunset sees them all. Follow on till the gold is cold, dancing out with the moonlit night. Knights in the green shields dance and shout.
So, some quick honourable mentions are The Witchwood by the Strawbs. This is a lovely little folk rock song detailing the actually quite horrific experience of someone being turned into a tree by a witch.
I think the screw like branches, I still rooted to the ground. I'm the spell is still unbroken, I am still a hidden slave till the casket.
Definitely check this whole album out, as it's again just an underrated classic. It's the only studio album by the Strawbs where they were joined by Rick Wakeman, who is obviously well known as being one of the best keyboard and piano players in rock. And he really makes his presence felt here on some of these songs. Definitely check out The Hangman and The Papist as well. Again, it's brilliant. It's possibly the best song this band ever recorded, telling another harrowing story, this time a bit more historical than fantastical. I won't spoil it here for you though, because it's genuinely just a brilliant piece of songwriting. My next honourable mentions is Lord of the Ages by Magna Carta. It's a pretty wacky piece of prog folk, to be honest. It's quite frankly a little, or maybe very short of being coherent lyrically speaking. The spoken word bits at the start are maybe a little bit overwrought, but you know what? It's actually really fun for what it is. The whole is a lovely little atmospheric medieval folk rock song with a middle rockin' section and some really nice acoustic guitar playing throughout.
Below a dark forest in caves of black granite, the children of darkness dwelled in oblivion, betraying one another in endless confusion for the Lord of the Dark.
And Carolanne Pegg's A Witch's Guide to the Underground is the most whimsical song I've included here. It could easily fit in some kind of weird, wacky 70s children's cartoon. It's sort of cutesy in its straightforwardness. This really is the absolute epitome of obscure. I only heard this song by absolute chance on a random Spotify playlist. Carolanne Pegg was also in the only slightly less obscure late 60s, early 70s folk band Mr. Fox, and spent most of her career as an ethnomusicologist at Cambridge University.
Sometimes it's dark and my knees get cold. Oh, this tunnel wall's got weeping mold. Up goes the fiddle and down goes the bow, and then I think of the fields below. It's marigold.
And you know what? I'm going to be a bit cheeky here. I'm going to suggest two of my own songs. Last year, I wrote a proggy folk song called Castle Crag. It's named after a kind of fey and weird feeling place in central Cumbria. I quite unashamedly stole bits of imagery from Witch of the Westmorland in order to really fit into that kind of Cumbrian folksy vibe.
Seasons pass us by, wasted away, our memories are all we have.
And secondly, a song I recorded with my band between the breaks, a song called The Moss Trooper. Again, set in the north of England, this time near the Scottish border. This song is still pretty proggy, but more historical than fantastical. It also has some flute and banjo solos throughout, so if you could check them out, I would definitely appreciate that.
Van Diemen's Land and the labourers joyful, half of us suffer now, and half are lying dead, cold in the ground. For love of life, not the love of gold, I live and I prosper now, as proof of an unjust world where merciful grace.
Definitely check out the entire playlist. Again, it's on Spotify and YouTube. There are loads more songs and artists included there, from Led Zeppelin to Thin Lizzy, John Martin, Rainbow, and June Tabor. And finally, if you like this video, please think about liking and subscribing. I'm still a super small channel, and I've been doing tons of these video essays for a while now. Every new sub and view is massively appreciated.